Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for what promises to be an enlightening and thought-provoking discussion tonight. I am Susie Kornblum. I am the Executive Director at Concord Children's Center. On behalf of everyone involved in our presentation tonight, welcome. Tonight's panel, Harvesting the Spirit of Transcendentalism in Education Today, is a collaborative effort between Concord Children's Center and the Transcendentalism Council of First Parish. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Shelley Hawks of the Council for partnering with us to make this event possible. I also want to thank CCC's own Jennifer Sachs, our Development and Outreach Coordinator, for herding all of these cats involved in tonight's event. And in addition, I want to acknowledge our former CCC Executive Director, Pat Nelson, who is unfortunately unable to be with us tonight, but this evening is her brainchild and would not be happening without her vision and focus over the past months. Finally, thank you to our panelists, and I will introduce you each momentarily. This evening's discussion is part of a broader Concord 250 celebrations, as well as our own milestone, the 50th anniversary of CCC. Since our founding in 1975 by Chris Gerzon and Deborah Begner, CCC has been dedicated to providing high-quality, full-time early childhood education. Today, we proudly serve 150 children with a team of 50 passionate educators. Our impact on working families in this community cannot be overstated. For 5 decades, we have supported working families by ensuring that their children are nurtured and cared for each day by professionals who have dedicated their lives to early learning. The Concord Children's Center mission is to cultivate an intimate and welcoming community where children develop respectful relationships and inquisitive minds, build confidence in their individual gifts, and are engaged, prepared, and inspired to learn. We believe in play-based education, fostering self-confidence, honoring each child's uniqueness, and embracing nature as a central teacher. These values align beautifully with the principles of transcendentalists who championed the potential of the individual and the wisdom of the natural world. In many ways, toddlers and transcendentalists share a common vision, one that values curiosity, connection, and lifelong learning. Tonight, we are honored to present a panel of educators who will explore how transcendentalist ideals continue to shape educational practice from preschool through high school. We'll hear how their work is inspired by the movement's commitment to individual growth, social justice, and deep engagement with nature. We are so glad you are here to be part of this conversation. Our moderator, Reverend Jenny Rankin, is a Unitarian Universalist minister who has served in parish and college settings in and around Boston. During her time as minister at First Parish in Concord, she immersed herself in the study and teaching of transcendentalism, leading classes and walking tours in the US and Europe. She currently serves as the interim minister at First Church in Salem, Unitarian Universalist. Jenny and her husband, Rich Higgins, have lived in Concord since 1997 and have 3 children, all of whom attended Concord Children's Center. Tonight's panelists are Tracy Dunn, Elise Mott, and Betsy Siebert. Tracy Dunn has taught studio arts at the high school level in Massachusetts public schools since 2001. Her instructional practices encourage positive interpersonal experiences and substantial learning opportunities through the process of making art. Throughout her career, she has turned to contemporary art to create a student-centered curriculum that honors curiosity, exploration, inquiry, collaboration, and dialogue. Currently, she is the visual arts teacher in the interdisciplinary program Rivers and Revolutions at Concord Carlisle High School. Tracy's son, now 15, attended Concord Children's Center when he first began his educational journey in Concord. Elise Mott has been teaching middle school students for 30 years and has taught social studies to students from 4th to 9th grades. Her most exciting moments teaching have been when she is immersed in project-based experiential learning, when students are connecting to the real world. She has taught at the Lawrenceville School and the New England Innovation Academy, and is currently the Assistant Director of Secondary School Placement and 6th grade English teacher at the Fenn School in Concord. Both of her children went to Concord Children's Center. Betsy Siebert is a retired early childhood educator and administrator. She was a preschool teacher at Concord Children's Center from 1980 to 1984, a teacher and director at the Barn Co-op Nursery School from 1985 to 2002, a preschool teacher at Neshoba Brooks School from 2003 to 2022, and coordinator of the Concord Area Preschool Association Scholarship Program from 2005 to 2015. Betsy retired in 2022 and continues to substitute teach at both Neshoba Brooks and Concord Children's Center. Both of her children attended Concord Children's Center. Thank you so much to all of you for agreeing to participate tonight. I'm excited to hear from each of you. And now I'll turn it over to Jenny Rankin, our moderator.
Thank you, Susie. Thanks so much. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you. I'm so glad you're here, and it's an honor for me to share the panel with old friends and new ones. So it's really exciting. You can't hear me? I have one on, but I have the mic on, but I can speak from the podium if that would be better. Is it not working? No? What? Let me try the podium. That's fine. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I always have to step on a stool, of course. I'm good. Okay. Okay. So it seems fitting to me that we are doing this event as part of the 250th celebration in Concord. Transcendentalism has been sometimes called the Second American Revolution. The Transcendentalist grandparents were the people of the Revolutionary War era who helped bring this new country into being. People like Reverend William Emerson, minister at First Parish, Emerson's grandfather, who rallied the Minutemen outside the Wright Tavern on the morning of April 19th. 50 years later, it was their grandchildren who would spark this new revolution. With American democracy still new, raw, and experimental, they would go on to create the first distinctively American literature, religion, educational philosophy, and social reform movement. My deep dive into Transcendentalism started the rainy spring of 2006, but really before that. Rich and I moved to Concord in '97, as Susie said, when I was called to be one of the ministers at First Parish, a blessing that in turn led to other blessings, like the neighborhood on Grove Street, where we made friends, who are still our friends, and the Concord Children's Center, where because of that, really, that creative, nurturing environment, I had time and peace of mind to pursue this exploration. But I think just by living here in Concord, inhabiting this land where the Thoreau, Emerson, and Alcott families once lived, this place where they walked, grew gardens, raised children, were a part of the community, as you are, just by living here, it seemed like the spirit of the ancestors was everywhere I turned. It was that spring, though, and Megan Marshall's electrifying book, had to bring it with me, The Peabody Sisters, 3 women who ignited American romanticism. It was this book that got me started, lit kind of a spark inside of me. I remember sitting over in the Transcendental alcove off the lobby, reading my way from one book to another as the rain poured down outside the library windows and the trees turned more and more green. It was the month of May. I'll never forget it. There was something about the Transcendentalists that captivated me. They were so eager to learn and grow. They seemed so awake, so alive to me. After years, intensive years of raising young children and working full-time, it was as if my mind kind of woke up again. They were passionate about learning and the world they lived in. To quote Robert Richardson, they were people with their minds on fire. And if I got close to them, I thought maybe I could catch a little of that excitement too. Inhaling books, learning languages, writing in their journals, these folks seem to be living at kind of a white heat. Elizabeth Palmer Peabody taught herself Hebrew at age 12 in order to read the Old Testament, the Hebrew scripture, in its original language so she could make up her own mind about religion. Or Margaret Fuller, who taught herself German at 18 with a friend and was so proficient she was the first translator of Goethe published in the United States. And it wasn't just their intellect that spoke to me. They were human, imperfect, as we are. They could be petty, jealous, squabble with each other. They wrestled with health, migraine, headaches, and tubercular lungs. And to a person, they were deeply acquainted with grief, losing children, siblings, and parents long before their time. The women, I'd say in particular, caught my eye, these powerful intellects born at a time when women couldn't go to college, couldn't enter law or divinity or medicine as their male friends were doing. And so, undeterred, they created their own college, designing for themselves a program of education as demanding as that of any boy being prepped for Harvard. It was a heady time. New ideas are flying high and low, Unitarian minister James Freeman Clarke said. Every person, as Mr. Emerson remarked to me yesterday, carries a revolution in their waistcoat pocket. But what is transcendentalism anyway? It's a movement that has always fiercely resisted definition. It doesn't like being pinned down or put into a box. Scholar Joel Myerson once said that transcendentalism was as slippery as mercury. I've always loved that. I think he's right, at least for me. It's always easier for me to say what it is not rather than what it is. It founded no institution, school, college, or church. It had no set dogma, creed, or systematic philosophy. It got its names from its detractors, as Impressionism did. You're a transcendentalist, someone would sneer, which was kind of shorthand for saying, you're full of foreign nonsense. It did have a journal, The Dial, informal groups like the Transcendental Club, 2 utopian experiments, Brook Farm in West Roxbury and the short-lived Fruitlands in Harvard, Mass. But for the most part, it was really just a loose gathering of individuals who lived in the 1830s, sorry, I advanced that by mistake, 1830s and 40s in and around Boston. Oops, wait a minute. Thank you. They lived in and around Boston, and Concord was the epicenter of the movement. It was a club of the like-minded, one of them said, where no two people thought alike. And I've always really liked what Annie Rose Marble said. She had been at Brook Farm, and in her old age, she said, the Transcendentalists were a race who dove into the infinite, soared into the illimitable, and never paid cash. That sounds about right. They rejected the status quo and railed against the materialism of their age, agreeing with Emerson, who said there was a, quote, desperate conservatism in the schools, in the state, and in the church. They insisted on thinking for themselves. Let's stop poring over these old texts from famous people who aren't alive anymore, Emerson said. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face. Why should not we also enjoy an original relationship to the universe? Americans needed to turn away from the past, turn away from their dependence on Europe, and learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Build, therefore, he exhorted, your own world. Trust your own direct personal experience. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. So how did all that show up in education, which is our focus tonight? Well, with these transcendentalist ideas simmering, a whole new philosophy of education emerged. John Locke had said that children were born like a blank slate, a tabula rasa, taking in stuff only through the five senses. If you couldn't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch it, it wasn't real. No, the transcendentalists said, influenced by German idealism and Kant, we can know things in other ways as well, through intuition, through turning to an inner spirit or wisdom that we're all born with. And so that meant for the teachers, and they were all school teachers, by the way, all the people I'm talking about tonight, Thoreau, Fuller, Emerson, Peabody, and Alcott, all worked in the classroom at one point. For the teachers, rote memorization, oral recitations where kids would regurgitate what they'd memorized, endless drilling, and those monotonous school days, that was all a thing of the past. A teacher's job, Alcott said, was not to stuff facts into a child as if they were a blank slate, but instead to draw out the wisdom that was already there inside each one of them. Self-culture was a big word for the transcendentalists. To culture, to cultivate, to help grow. Teachers tried to help children grow, encourage that unfolding of heart, mind, and spirit. And so there was a tremendous burst of innovation and experimentation during this time. Bronson Alcott's Temple Street School was one of the first experimental schools in America. Child-centered, hands-on learning, Socratic method, conversations with children, not lecturing at them, kind-hearted, no corporal punishment. Even the way he set up the physical space was different. Not a classroom with desks all in rows, but a big, bright, airy space with paintings on the wall and maps, sculptures of Shakespeare and Plato. And he had the students' desks all around the outside, looking towards the wall so that they could sit at their desk and focus. And then he left the middle part open so they could come together and do group projects, which you've got to believe in that day and age was truly a radical thing. Innovation was all around. Margaret Fuller, who came up with a whole new adult ed model for women. Thoreau and his brother John, who took students out of doors, out of the classroom, rambling the fields and woods of Concord to learn botany and geology. And they also went to the real everyday Concord village, visiting the gunsmith, the surveyor, and the newspaper office to see how it all worked. This was experiential education, hands-on learning, having experiences and then reflecting on them through conversation, journal writing, and more. So now let's listen to some modern day teachers as they reflect on their own experiences in and out of the classroom. What projects have captured your hearts, I asked them. What has lit you up from the inside? I wonder, as Betsy Siebert would say, how might we detect those transcendentalist seeds planted so long ago? How might we see them bearing fruit in our own time? So Betsy, you're up. Or down, wherever you want to be.
Thank you, Jenny. Tell me if this is good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? All right, now I just have to make sure I can advance. There we go. Okay. My first job when I moved to Concord was actually not as a teacher. It was at Walden Pond. I had recently graduated from college with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Parks and Recreation. And I thought that I was going to spend my career involved in outdoor education and park management. At Walden, I worked on a variety of park maintenance jobs, including erosion control projects on the trails and at the original Thoreau cabin site. I was curious to learn more about this man, Henry David Thoreau, who was very popular with all the park visitors who came from all over the world. So I read his book, Walden. This was my first introduction to transcendentalist ideas, and after reading his lush descriptions of nature and learning more about Thoreau, I realized that we had some things in common. We both clearly shared a passion for using nature as a classroom. Little did I know at that time that I was going to become a teacher. That wasn't in the plan. My seasonal position at Walden ended in September, and I needed to look for other work, and lo and behold, I found a job at Concord Children's Center, and that job kickstarted my career as an early childhood educator. Teaching has become not only my profession, but also my passion. I find working with young children to be refreshing and enlightening and deeply rewarding. And as an educator, my goal is to inspire a passion for learning in each and every child that I teach. I am passionate about science and exploring nature, and I love doing that with young children. I especially enjoy evoking the look of wonder and awe on a preschooler's face. It allows me to relive the magic of childhood. And every time I watch a caterpillar turn into a chrysalis and then turn into a butterfly, I feel the magic. Jenny asked us to share a project or an activity that we are especially passionate about. So I chose the monarch butterfly investigation because that is the way I like to start each school year. Some of you may be asking, why monarchs? Well, to me, monarchs are very special. They are one of the only migrating butterflies in the world. Because of this, they're very important pollinators. They travel long distances to their overwintering sites. The northeastern monarchs migrate to central Mexico, and the northwestern monarchs overwinter at a number of different sites along the coast of California because they can't fly over the Rockies. Another thing that makes monarchs special is that their eggs and their caterpillars can be found right here in Concord in late August and September, which is perfect timing for an authentic nature experience as it coincides with the beginning of the school year. Sometimes during a nature hike, we hunt for and find these adorable striped caterpillars with the children. Other times I find them and bring them into my classroom. The children learn about the life cycle of the butterfly and observe their metamorphosis. We teach the children about the monarch's host plant, the milkweed, and have them help feed the leaves to the hungry caterpillars. This is the only thing that they eat. This is what I call hands-on learning. I believe Henry David Thoreau called it learn by doing. This experience gives the children an opportunity to care for something that is smaller than they are. They learn to be gentle when they handle the caterpillars with respect, when they're given opportunities to touch them. They also learn that they will scare the caterpillars if they bang on the side of the container. And yes, that often happens. Self-control is a skill that most preschoolers are working on. So these opportunities give them lots of time to practice. They are encouraged to ask lots of questions and share their daily observations with the class. This shared experience of learning about butterflies helps to unify the class, give us a common goal, and it's also a fun community building activity. The caterpillars spend about 2 weeks munching on leaves and dropping frass. The bigger the caterpillar gets, so does the size of the frass. The caterpillars grow up to 2,000 times their original size. Think about that. This concept is fascinating to young children and adults alike. After about 2 weeks, the caterpillars will be full grown and they'll find a place to attach themselves to the top of the container so they can do their metamorphosis. At this point, the children really have to be patient and control their impulses because they have to be careful not to touch the caterpillars while they're hanging in their J shape. This takes about 24 hours and then they will form their chrysalis. The children watch the caterpillars wiggle and shed their exoskeleton before they liquefy into this bright green chrysalis. This part of the metamorphosis only takes about 2 minutes, so there are times when we miss it. We might not be watching at the moment that it happens, but sometime later someone will say, look, it's green. So it's always helpful to have more than one caterpillar because sometimes you do miss it. Once the chrysalis is fully formed, it takes about 14 days for the butterflies to actually emerge. At this point, the children often start asking many questions. Young children are all natural scientists. They are not afraid to ask questions. That is what science is all about, inquiry. They often ask, where did the antennas go? What happened to the yellow, black, and white stripes? Where is the caterpillar? Where is the mom? One of the big questions. Why does it want to turn into a butterfly? Which I think is a good question. I try to answer these questions with more questions, much like Bronson Alcott did many years ago. He utilized the Socratic method in his teaching, which emphasized questioning to stimulate critical thinking and self-discovery. He believed that learning should be a collaborative process with teachers guiding students through questioning to help them arrive at their own understanding. I too believe this is an effective method and found it to be a very helpful teaching tool, even with preschoolers. Okay. The children's questions inspire further investigation and wondering. We follow a multidisciplinary approach, and we spend the next couple of weeks reading both fiction and nonfiction books about butterflies, singing songs about butterflies, making butterflies with Play-Doh, paint, markers, paper mache. We sort caterpillars, we count butterflies, we make wings, and we turn into butterflies. We go on lots of nature walks, and we learn about what it means to migrate, because that will be the next step. Finally, the chrysalis is turned black and our beautiful monarch butterflies begin to emerge. Once a butterfly emerges from its chrysalis, it hangs upside down, allowing their wings to expand and dry. The butterfly needs several hours, 3 to 4, sometimes up to 24, to fully mature and develop its flight capabilities. Now for the real magic, and my favorite part of this investigation. We take the butterflies outside to prepare for the release. It is not always easy to say goodbye to something that you've cared for, but it is an important lesson for the children to learn. Butterflies belong in nature, and so we need to return them. We show the children how to use just one finger to gently hold the butterfly and get a real close look at its wings, its head, the thorax, the proboscis, the antenna, the abdomen. We have the children take turns passing the butterfly from finger to finger, and when the butterflies are ready to fly, we wave goodbye and wish them a safe journey to Mexico. And this is that look of wonder I spoke about earlier. Well, you just observed the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, but the learning doesn't stop there. Each year, the children express interest in continuing conversations about the butterflies and reflecting on their experience. In the first photo, the children wanted to chart how many male versus female butterflies emerged. We teach them how they can figure out the sex. That year, there was a lot more females, as you can tell. In the second photograph, this little boy, we were learning about Earth Day in April, 6 months after our last butterfly was released, and this 4-year-old child volunteered to draw a picture of the Earth. It included a cluster of orange dots. When asked what they were, he said, "Those are the butterflies in Mexico." And I'd like to just end with one of my favorite photos, as well as one of my favorite quotes. There is no end in nature, every ending is a beginning.
Am I now? Hello, yes, okay, good. So tying it back to the transcendentalists, there's an awful lot of transcendentalists in there, isn't there? Like you said, child-centered, you said the children wanted to track the male and female. Holistic, you mentioned social emotional learning and self-control, using nature as a classroom, of course, the Socratic method, the way you always ask a question, and they ask questions and you keep them going. And you remind me of Thoreau. I didn't know that story. I've known Betsy for a long time, but I'd forgotten she worked at Walden Pond till we were getting ready. And your love both of nature and your love of science, you know, because he seems so in love with nature and the world and life, and he was also such a meticulous naturalist with his little notes about when flowers, you know. So those are some of the things I was thinking of. Anything else you want to add, or I've got a quote for you?
I can't think of anything else.
Okay, good. Well, you've added a lot. So the quote I thought of was from Ralph Waldo Emerson from his book, I think it's from Nature. "Few adults can truly see nature," he said. "Most persons do not see the sun. They only have a very superficial seeing. The sun illuminates only the eye of the man, but shines into the eye and the heart of the child." And what he said was that if adults want to truly kind of have a relationship with nature, they need to retain what he called the spirit of infancy, you know, even into adulthood. And then if they were able to do that, they could really have a relationship with nature and feel that sense of what he called wild delight, even in spite of great sorrow. So,
And I call that the inner child.
inner child. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. All
Love
right.
that. Thank
Elise, we're on to you.
If you don't want to go up there, don't.
No, I think it's easy to advance the slides. Yeah, I'm going to stand on this. Can you hear me? Hi. Yes, so now we're moving into middle school, the world of middle school, which can be messy and exciting, but there's never a dull moment teaching middle schoolers. I did a project called Bridging the Generations, and this was a humanities project and a one that I collaborated with the art teacher at New England Innovation Academy. And this project, again, was with 8th graders, and I developed it with Aaron Grocke, a colleague of mine who taught studio art at New England Innovation Academy in Marlborough. It looked really through the lens of service learning, which was the other part of my position there. And the idea of service learning is getting kids out into the real world, volunteering, thinking about their contributions and some of the larger problems of the world. And so it was steeped in real world education and also asked students to reflect on their experiences and what they learned, either through journal writing or discussion in classes or reporting out to the whole school. So I liked this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, "All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better." And I think that really describes sort of where my excitement comes in teaching, because this project was an experiment and one that required, you know, some risk-taking both for the students and for me as a teacher. But I greatly admire the Transcendentalists and their ability to try new things in education. They weren't afraid to experiment in any way. And my greatest joy in working with middle schoolers is, again, trying new things, seeing what lights them up, seeing what engages them. And they always surprise and delight me in how they shed new light on something that I would have never imagined as I had planned it. And that is definitely one of the most exciting part of working with this age group. So Bridging the Generations was a project I had heard about actually from a colleague, and it seemed to require, you know, a lot of work, a lot of coordination, but mostly also taking risks and asking my students to do something new that's out of their comfort zone. For example, many of them were really shy or uncertain about talking to people that they had never met before. So we needed to work through some of kind of the social and emotional parts of this project as much as the academic skills that were required. In this project, students prepared first in the classroom by learning about how to construct open-ended questions, generating rich interview questions for seniors, and really thinking about those that would elicit a connection and help bridge the decades that existed between them. Many of my students were really curious to learn about how schools had changed over the last 50 years, but they also wanted to know about their families, their careers, hobbies that they still loved, military service, and maybe how they experienced different historical moments. So when we arrived at the assisted living facility called New Horizons, the 8th graders were asked to do what journalists do, take notes, record the interview, and needed to learn how to even start with some small talk to kind of break the ice. As I rotated around to each group during the interview process, I was really struck by smiles and laughter and connections that were made. And the students really built kind of this new sense of confidence in themselves, which was really amazing to witness. Next, my colleague then, who teaches art, had the students photograph their senior. And when they got back to the studio, they learned how to draw portraits, where seniors who took part then were invited to come to a final gallery exhibition. But here's a picture that we took of the whole group all together. And I think it kind of captures some of the joy both from the students and also from the seniors. So the humanities skills that students were asked to think about were, the importance of careful listening, how you make connections, asking evocative questions, writing clearly, and revising and editing their work, because it was important that it was the final copy was going to be an exhibition. So you certainly had to think about punctuation and editing. In art, they really worked on composition, perspective, sketching, and then portraiture. So it's really my belief that education is a holistic experience. So in the real world, there aren't silos that fit neatly into categories of science, English, or mathematics. And the students were really empowered in this project to think critically and to think about their own perceptions and stereotypes about senior citizens. And it allowed them, by getting to know who they interviewed, to start to challenge what they thought they knew. And some of those sort of aha moments really kind of created those connections and some lasting relationships that students felt. They were really excited when the seniors came. They could show them their school. They could show them their final piece of art. You can see a little bit how what some of their final products were. They mostly were using watercolor, and some were just using just regular pencil and charcoal. So middle schoolers are developing identity, empathy, and critical thinking. And this simple experience kind of transcends, I think, what we think of as a prescriptive idea of education. And instead of just, again, filling student heads with knowledge, they were really asked to generate their own understanding, their own knowledge from this experience, and think about the wisdom that they gained by taking part in this and taking risks. I especially love this one. And shows also kind of the process from photograph to portrait. And I love this final quote by Margaret Fuller, that very early I knew that the only object in life was to grow. And I saw really deep growth, both in my students and in the seniors we worked with, and as a teacher, I certainly grew as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. They were good artists, some of those people, right? Wow, it's amazing. Yeah. So I heard a lot of, you mentioned a lot of the transcendentalist themes of, experimenting, trying new things, innovation. Also that using, not just, we talked about nature as a classroom, now you're using the world as a classroom. They didn't learn about history of the World War II era by reading books or watching movies or looking it up on ChatGPT. They learned about it by talking to real people. So any other reflections you have on that? Otherwise, I have, of course, another quote, but anyone else want to chip in and say anything else they heard in Elise's thing? No? All right. We can keep going. We're going to have sort of a transcendentalist style conversation at the end, we hope, with all of you and with us, so there'll be time for that. So it was another quote from Emerson, also about experiments. And the reason I think I partly, he wrote this 9 months after his son Waldo died. So the fact that he would say this at that time really always moved me. Do not be too timid and afraid. Do not be too timid and squeamish about your actions. All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. What if you may get your coat soiled or torn? What if you do fall and get fairly rolled in the dust once or twice? Up again. You shall never be afraid of a tumble. So, and now we got Tracy.
All right, everyone can hear me all right? We're good? Okay, so I'm going to take you into the high school experience, just as soon as I learn where the advancing, that guy? All right, there we have it. Okay, so I start with this quote by Henry David Thoreau. I teach in Rivers and Revolutions. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. I'll go into describing it a bit for you too. But at the high school level, we do sometimes choose the more challenging quotes because even as an adult, it can be hard to decipher them and to be alongside them, as we heard before, learning with them. And this one kind of throws me every time. Children who play life discern its true law and relations more clearly than men who failed to live it worthily, but who think that they are wiser by experience, that is, by failure. So really, it's interesting, and so using that word experience in there is a little bit different, not experiential, but this idea that the longer you're here and the more experience you have might make you wiser, but that might mean that you're failing to see all that a young person sees. Okay, so I do want to take a moment to explain the program and its connections to the Transcendentalists, but first I'd like to share a bit about the early days of the program. Before coming to CCHS in 2012, I had been teaching in other districts for about 8 years. When I accepted the opportunity to help launch the program, it was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. I had a job that I already really liked and thought I would retire in. So when this came along, and they said, we got something really exciting, something really new, but it's going to be a pilot program. You're gonna have 2 years to make it work, and after, you're out of a job if it doesn't fly. So it was a bit scary. So there was a lot of the experience of launching the program, and even still in teaching in it now, that's very human and requires some humility and humbleness to see if it will run, another year. It's quite different, and sometimes people aren't easy to accept that. But yes, it was an exciting chance to try something new, innovative, and especially in public education. One of the key reasons I believe the Rivers and Revolutions program has been successful is because from the very beginning, we made a conscious effort to listen to students' feedback. We also dedicated a lot of time to discussions, collaboration, and reflection as a team of 5 teachers. I'll explain more of that team of 5 teachers. The students and teachers who took the bold step to be part of this program when it was brand new shaped and designed the program we have today. So this is 13 years later, it still exists. And in many ways, that spirit of collaboration continues. The program is always seeking feedback from students and adapting to meet their evolving needs. And as we all know, young people in 2025 are quite different from young people in 2012. Additionally, we have had new leadership, we've brought on new teachers, and this always means bringing fresh ideas and educational perspectives that keep the program truly dynamic and responsive. I also want to mention that in my early years of launching the program, like we've heard before, my son, Solon Murphy, was at Concord Children's Center. So he was in beautiful care while I was out doing work that was really important to me. So when I would come to pick him up at the end of the day and he'd be doing something similar to me, he's outside, he's exploring, he's making friends, he's meeting dogs who are walking by, right? There was so much going on for him every day that it made me feel that much better going off to do my work every day. So the countdown, just to help you understand the program. We created this countdown just to give you the nuts and bolts. It can be hard to describe something that's so immersive and that is 5 subject matters all at once. But it starts with, it is an interdisciplinary, place-based program that offers students the opportunity to pursue rigorous, hands-on, experiential learning outside the traditional classroom environment. I also like to remind people that Rivers and Revolutions is not just a program at CCHS, it's a learning community. And it involves a team of 5 teachers from different subject areas working together to educate a cohort of diverse students, primarily 12th graders. Our curriculum reflects and embraces transcendentalist philosophies in various forms, and our investment in building a caring and challenging learning environment each and every semester is essential to helping students engage deeply with the material and with each other. We focus not only on academic growth, but also on fostering a sense of personal responsibility, creativity, and intellectual curiosity that will serve them long after they leave our program. So, the countdown. We are 5 teachers, so there's the current team. We're at the top of Mount Watatic, which is one of the really fun hikes we take students on. We also have students that are coming to us from Boston. Some of them have never hiked a mountain before, so we build up to this, and if you've been there, it's a nice, easy hike with really big views all the way out to Boston on a clear day. But so this team of teachers, there's math, science, English, history, and art. And we work with students for the duration of the day. They have 4 or 5 hours with us. So instead of having 1 hour of art, then the bell rings, 1 hour of math, then the bell rings, then you go to science, and these things are not connected. And in my opinion, sort of punish a student who likes to go deeply. If a bell rings while you're deeply into something you're doing, and the teacher says, sorry, bell rings, like you're out the door, it kind of keeps you in a more shallow zone of learning. So by working all together, we take turns leading the day. So if I'm leading, then I have 4 other teachers that are helping me set up materials, check for understanding, move things to the drying rack, whatever is needed to make a day like a really big learning lesson for the students. There we are. Okay, so 4, the countdown to 4. The approaches that we have are interdisciplinary, experiential, creative, and collaborative. So I think interdisciplinary, we all understand, it's all those 5 disciplines working together. Experiential is a lot more of that hands-on, whether it's in the world, in nature, or even in conversations or making a new friend. We don't let them have cell phones when they're in there, so the idea of actually making a friend in a much more direct way, getting comfortable with people that you don't know, just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Those are huge moments that the experiential umbrella, it's really big. It includes nature and beyond. And then creativity, we sort of think of every piece of the program, we are trying to take feedback. So we're sort of creating it in real time with students. And then collaboration happens. We are modeling it as teachers. We don't always do like a perfect collaboration. Sometimes we're irritated at each other. We have to work through it, give like another sort of, this is what I need you to do right now. And so they start to see how an effective team works. It's not always smooth. Sometimes it's hard, but we make it authentic and we're all good to each other. So they get to see how that comes together and then practice it themselves. We have 3 units of study, Rivers. Obviously, this is place-based education. We have beautiful rivers and waterways running all throughout Concord. Revolutions, we've heard of a couple now. We have the Revolution, the American Revolution. We also have the Transcendentalist Revolution. We also have the Industrial Revolution, which came through here. And many people feel we're in the middle of a revolution right now, a digital revolution. And then Journeys is, most of our students are 12th graders, so we're sort of setting them up for their journey next. So sort of thinking of the journey to getting you here today, some journeys in the present moment, and then how are we facilitating the journeys that you have in your future. And then 2 is 2 semesters. We run in the fall and then we run in the spring, and that's always a big debate. Do you sign up in the fall? Do you sign up in the spring? Do you want to be studying a river when it's warm and you can climb into it and measure it, or do you want to start in the spring semester starts in January when it's frozen and it's ice? Both semesters are a ton of fun, and it just means everyone's going to get cold weather, everyone's going to get warm weather, but it happens at the other side of the curriculum. So even for teachers, this is really challenging. So the weather also keeps everything extremely dynamic for us. And then we have our one mission together. So Rivers and Revolutions cultivates a diverse cohort of learners who integrate skills from several academic disciplines and from personal experience to investigate and ultimately improve the myriad relationships that characterize our community. So we're always trying to develop the individual, but with the community at mind, in our hearts. Yeah. And so then, yes, it's an embracing of an opportunity, an unforgettable opportunity. And so much like the transcendentalists who seem to always be welcoming experiments and trying new things, this takes a certain kind of student to say, yeah, I'm willing to try something new for a semester. And often they say, that was the best semester of my life. And they go off to college and they ring back and say, everything we talked about, we're talking about it in college. Those skills really helped me to talk to professors and make new friends. And they're really grateful for this opportunity. It seems to fall at just the right moment before they go off to college. And journaling, which of course was really important to the transcendentalists, we don't have any textbooks or specific reading material. We do have students choosing their own reading material, but we call journaling writing your own textbook. So each day you date it, you put in the essential questions, you put in the title of the lesson. We usually have a couple handouts that might be related to the day, and then we do a little bit of orienting to what we're about to go and see, and then we go out and see it. And journals go with us everywhere. Sometimes they get wet, sometimes they get left behind. Somehow they always make their way back to us, which is really great. So I thought I would just take you through a few lessons so you could understand how this works. One of our favorite quotes to begin the semester is, "The life in us is like the water in the river," Henry David Thoreau. So we open with this question, and often beside the river, and give students some of their first opportunities to journal and take in the scene and sort of ponder over the question. And then we come back to it in different lessons. So this is a math lesson where students are doing bridge building activities, and so they're ultimately doing test activities, testing bridges, using the iterative process to create a bridge that will then be a competitive bridge against their peers. So they're working in teams to figure out how to build the strongest bridge with a limited number of materials. So we think of this iterative process as learning how to adapt like the river. And of course, I like to lead the days that include painting, and so I get them interested and curious about what is a flow state. Almost every young person will say that they've had a flow state. More and more I hear playing video games is where they reach their flow state. So I had to look it up, like, is that a flow state? It turns out by research it is having a similar impact on the brain. So my preferred way to enter flow state is through making art, and I invite students to do that with me. And so by working, we sometimes work really small and precious and tiny, and then sometimes we work really big where it takes your whole body to do the painting, and everyone has to sort of get out of each other's way and move around the room. And this is one of my favorite projects, a body map project. So I often call this learning how to flow like the river. Then we might take students for a history lesson, a social studies lesson, up to Lowell, where we look at the Industrial Revolution, and we walk along canals, and we check out the river, the Merrimack River, which is, compared to what we have here, it's where the Concord River spills into the Merrimack, but it's a much bigger river to be beside, and sort of think of all that energy that was once harnessed to run these mills, and we sort of take them through and see the mills. There's great tours up there too, but sometimes we just do the walking tour ourselves and just sort of out of our own inquiry, what can we pick up on what life was like back then? So yeah, learning how to work like a river, right? I mean, work ethic. A river knows how to work very hard. It just continues on and on. And then I don't know if you are aware, but Jack Kerouac was raised in Lowell, so we also study some of his writing. We go to the Kerouac Park, which is sometimes full of interesting characters that you don't have here in Concord. And they're like, there's like poop everywhere, there's trash everywhere, right? But we're here right outside of Lowell High School. Their high school campus has canals running right through it. It's pretty exciting. I've done some work up there too. And we have a student trying out what it's like to write like a river, using Jack Kerouac's stream of consciousness style of writing. Oh, and then I love this. We go to Old Calf Pasture, which is just across from Egg Rock, which is where the Sudbury River and the Aspet River come to form the Concord River. We do a lot of deep dives into the history there. But then we just sort of ask these questions, like what is happening when two rivers merge? Why do they change name? Why do they start a new name? How do we determine when sometimes one river enters another and they keep some other river's name? So what happens when people merge? What happens when cultures merge? What happens when rivers merge? And then I like this too, because we have two students working side by side, new friendships are made and new people are merging. And then here we are at the Merrimack River thinking about, I feel like this relates to your quote, Elise, with the ending, right? Which there really never is an ending, but here we are looking at the Concord River spills into the Merrimack and it loses its name. It gives way to the Merrimack, which is going to reach the ocean. And so all of these rivers are on their way down to the ocean, but of course they just feed right into the hydrologic cycle and it all begins again. And so they're just sort of starting to, by actually being out in all of these places, understanding all these big systems and big patterns that rivers can provide for us that also relate to life and us being like a river. We have stewardship projects. So here we are building an outdoor classroom. And we talk about how you have to persist like a river, like it might be hot and you don't have a shovel, but someone else got the shovel, and what am I gonna do? And so how can they collaborate together and persist through turning an outdoor space into a classroom? Just sort of saying, you know, rivers, they come up against obstacles. They have to go around them. They have to figure this out, and you can do it too. And then we also have Socratic seminars that are student-led, and we're just there to help if they need a nudge. But we have one of our seminars, we do one a week. Today was our seminar day, and we were actually studying MCI redesign, like what would we do at MCI if we had the power to decide what happens there. But earlier in the semester, we were looking at, is life like a river? Can we actually start to work together now that we've had all of these experiences? Through conversation, can we start to come to some new conclusions? The question feels weird to them at the beginning, and then by this point, they have a lot of new, fresh ideas. Then, another thing that I noticed a pattern as we were all sharing is that the arts seem to be like the closure, right? So there's this way in which all these experiences are synthesized through the arts. There's some beautiful consolidation that happens when your hands are working with your mind and your memories, and they have their journals nearby, and they're sort of starting to decide what goes into an artifact. You could write a paper, you could write an essay, and we do that too, but I often think that you have to think about what each paragraph is gonna say, and a piece of art is the same thing. Like, how are you gonna choose this color? Why is it included? How are you gonna choose an icon, a symbol? Why is it included? In this piece in particular, they trace their bodies, which kind of captures their inner child. That's something they did as kids, and they fill them in with colors that are more symbolic and meaningful. And then they trace another figure onto them who is supposed to be part of their well-being. So that could be a grandparent, it could be, I've had students use their pets, it could be a friend, it could be a teacher, it could be anybody in your life that you think is part of your well-being. And sort of this idea that you're not going on this journey by yourself. And then the negative space around is your response to the environment and how you feel about the environment that's around you. So that was this picture you saw earlier when they have to paint in large space. And then we hang them all up, and it starts to feel like they're banners that are more telling than the actual people. Like, we circle up together a lot through the semester, but this is a different kind of circling up. It's their art version of themselves, and it does seem to capture something really spiritual. And we invite all the friends and families of students to come out and enjoy this closing ceremony together. And all of their learning sort of manifests in this moment. It's really a great closing for us. So that is Rivers and Revolutions, and I just wanted to offer a quote by Elizabeth Palmer Peabody: "A community is not a mere aggregation of individuals, but a spiritual unity, a living whole, a true society." So that is really our aim, is always there's this tension between wanting to develop the student and have them come to know themselves, but pull them out of an educational model that can sometimes feel really competitive and lonely and isolating, and put them in a learning situation where you can develop yourself while also developing other people beside you and an entire community around you. You could even help a teacher out, right? You could help a visitor to the classroom out. And we have kids of all abilities in the program. So we have kids who are, some of them launching off into Ivy Leagues. We have other kids that are going to be going to, they're going to become Masons, students that just want to do a gap year. We have students who are special needs and will be part of the school system until age 22. And so unlike other programs in the school that are more about creating programs for similar like kids, this is about really different kinds of kids. So we try to make as diverse of a cohort as possible because it leads to the best learning, the best relationships, great surprises, and lots of compassion. Right? So should I go, are we ready? Are we ready? Yeah?
Well, okay, so it's fascinating to me I love how you structured it, going from the youngest to middle to, high school. It's just fascinating to see it through your eyes and then to connect the dots of how we evolve and what we do. And it makes me want to go back to start all over.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So true.
I was going to share that my daughter went through the Rivers program, and what was really interesting to me, you had talked about keep staying with a young mind, and I think my lesson from her experience was it was the parents who were most resistant to putting their kids into the program. The kids really wanted to go, but the parents were like, you're not going to get your second science class in before college, you're not going to get this, you're not going to get math, you're going to be behind. But really, you can see they zoom ahead in this program, and so it's like the parents have to remember what school is about and for, and those students kind of have it figured out, so thank you.
So maybe we don't have rote memorization and endless drills, but we have a new kind of perhaps conformity or conservatism that we need to battle against, yeah. Yeah.
And her daughter is very successful now. We'll just share that. She's doing really well out in the world. Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you to you. It's such an experience to see the educators from the very young and the middle and the growing. And I see such a unified, thoughtful openness from the adults. And if the adults didn't set the environment for the learning and the cooperation and the curiosity of all ages, we would be missing out, and you're helping the young children to grow into wonderful adults. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Question back there, Susie?
I'm so sorry.
Hi. Just anywhere. Would Parker School be an example of this kind of education, transcendental education, or what percentage of it do you think would be?
Yeah, I would say the Parker School in Devens.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say for sure. It's also taking an interdisciplinary approach and is project-based. So yes, I would say, that their approach is more sort of in line with transcendentalism and some of the concepts we're talking about, for sure.
I've done a little bit of professional development there, and one of my favorite things is they don't even really do grades, they do mastery portfolios. So they have a whole different idea of how you learn if you're learning and how you measure that, and it's really effective.
I think just adding on to that, being a part of this school in Marlboro it was a brand new school, so I was part of kind of the team as they were launching the school. And it was fascinating to watch the interest of becoming more of a mastery type transcript school. And apparently the decision then to not do that and go with grades came from a Dartmouth admissions director who said, anyone with a mastery transcript, it takes us that much longer. So when we're reading our files, we'll just put them in the no pile because it takes too long. So we went with the grades. And it was just a fascinating moment to think about when a school's really philosophically wrestling with how to move forward and to really focus more on learning and skill development than just grade.
While also wanting their kids to succeed, right? So it's not an easy decision, I would imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I just want to say, as a Dartmouth alum, I take offense to that.
I think we have a couple others in
I should
the
have
group
just
here.
said a competitive college. My apologies.
But I found this really hopeful, and thank you all. And I would have thought that someone mentioned the digital revolution. Well, it's changed kids' brains, right? And so it seems to make the kind of education you guys are talking about much more difficult. Attention is the bedrock of what you're talking about, and yet that appears to be, there's less of it. So how do you deal with that?
We thought we were going to get that question. I didn't know it was going to come from you, but that's okay. Anyone want to take a stab at how do you see technology, whether it's AI or just other kinds of, what's your personal experience as a teacher? I don't know whether, maybe you didn't have to deal with that, Betsy, because they were little. The littles.
Right. At Neshoba, we did have access to iPads, and there was an expectation that they were able to turn them on, turn them off, and do a program.
Right. What about during COVID, though? Because during COVID, you had to teach through Zoom, right?
Yes,
Is that
we
true?
did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We taught preschool classrooms through Zoom.
Incredible.
It was,
Amazing.
that was rough.
Oh, my God.
Yes. It kind of, it had to turn it into entertainment, because it was hard to
Keep
get
them-
kids to
keep
attend
them right,
if you weren't
exactly.
entertaining them.
Yeah. What are other folks on technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I have kind of that sense. I mean, I tend to feel that some of the best creative ideas and thinking comes when you put all the technology away. At the same time, there's so many opportunities to virtually visit historical places in the world, to be able to interview people over Zoom, and there are so many opportunities. I think it's how do you balance it? Because the kids are using technology so much when they go home, and it's a way now they're connecting, and it's a whole social piece. But I think, with the AI and that moving into a whole nother piece of education, there's a lot of what ifs for the future. And I guess I'm sort of grateful I'm on this end of my career and not starting my teaching career now. But, it just requires that much more innovation to think about how to incorporate it in a way that balances kind of health and wellness. But I'm interested that you all put no phones, no electronics when you do your field work, right?
And definitely not with field work. So
Yeah.
I was going to start with, probably we've all experienced being called mom and maybe dad. And I was wondering, when will the day hit where I'm called Siri or Alexa? Something's just gonna slip up. Because it did feel like and even in this arc from when we started this program 2012 to where we are now, it's completely different. I now say students can often be seen 3 screens deep, they have their cell phone, their one-to-one laptop, and then the teacher's smartboard. And it's just, it's sad. You look through rooms and there's so much attention on those screens instead of each other. So we do take their cell phones away. Well, we have caddies. We invite them to put them away, and we remind them to put them away, and we insist that they put them away. We don't actually get as much resistance as I would have expected. There's certainly around lunchtime they want it back because they want to know what their friends are doing for lunch, or perhaps they needed to pay for lunch. but they mostly appreciate it. And there were some years where we didn't do that, and where we noticed it the most was bus rides. It was just silent. Like they were all just like on their phones, like listening to music maybe, whatever. When we removed them and gave them like a radio to play, they started singing together, talking together, drawing in their journals. Like all of a sudden, it was this hour that used to just be transportation became another rich opportunity for connection. So.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Plus, with art and getting your hands dirty, you can't be using your phone if your hands are busy. Right? So,
Get your phone all dirty.
yeah.
That would not be
Yeah.
good. I don't think you call this maybe technology, but I'm thinking of Thoreau going out to Walden Pond, and I think the railroad came to Concord in 1844, and he went out in 1845, and he had to, and it was right there, I mean, right near his cabin, right? And so he had to, that was a challenge for him in his time. And I'm not deep enough into Thoreau to tell you how he dealt with that challenge, but they had challenges too, I guess, is what I'm saying. I think we had a question back there. Oh, one here and then back there.
Yeah, this is very much reminds me of my early school years. I remember in the 4th grade, we were doing Greeks, and we painted the floor with Greece, the map of Greece. We rode as astronauts across the gym floor with Jason and the Argonauts, and we practiced orations with our mouths full of pebbles.
Oh my
And, and we had ended up with the Olympic Games, where we each made our own shield and we made our own chitons, and then we had the games in the field. And I still have the laurels I won as a runner. I don't know. Anyway, it reminds me of that, and I'm so pleased that you're carrying it on and improving it. It's proved great in my memories of my education, and I'm just delighted to hear what you have done.
Thank you so much. I think one over here. Yeah.
It's like town meeting.
It's like, what's her name?
It's like town meeting.
That white
Much
woman,
less
that
scary.
Vanya White.
Thank you.
Remember that woman?
You described two starkly different things. One, the experience with devices, and the other experience without it. And you seem to be happier about the experience. You saw more joy in the students than the experience without it. In the era that we're moving into, how do you see making that joy something that's recoverable as educators, if you could all address that?
I think these moments where they can experiment breaks, right? Like experiment with and experience a break from it and sort of realize what that does for them. They usually really appreciate it in the end. But I do know that it's a strange space where they're going to have to self-regulate and also be discerning. Like some usage is really important and really helpful and can by all means be really creative or eye-opening to other cultures and other people. But it is just making sure you're not losing some other piece of your faculties in your life experience to the point where we hear the reports of loneliness, right? So loneliness, that there's lots of loneliness that young people and all people are feeling. So it is sort of like, how do you use it, but not lose your life to it?
I think for the young children, we need to educate the parents as to the importance of putting those things away. The balance, we tell our parents that, so they say no more than 2 hours a day, and we recommend less if possible for young children. The less, the better, because it really does stifle their curiosity because they get zoned out. And so they're not utilizing their whole brain in the same way that you are when you're doing a sensory experiential activity. So I feel like it's the educating parents so they understand that at a young age, so that, and I think reinforcing it as the children grow, because they don't have control when they're really young. And as they age, hopefully they will understand and know how it it does disconnect them from the world. Even though you can connect and Zoom to faraway places with the technology, it disconnects them from the human experience. So I think it's the educating of the parents as far as at the level of preschool and young children. I did have an experience that really shocked me a few years ago when I was teaching and we were on a nature hike. And I think it was when we were learning about birds, and a child asked me about what, is that a hawk or is it a something? And I didn't know. I actually really didn't know what the bird was because I couldn't really see it. So I said, well, I'm not sure. What do you think? And he said, well, don't you have a phone? Can't you just Google it? And I felt so sad, that, this was a 3-year-old said that to me, to just Google it, like Alexa. And that's when I thought, gee, this is really not good, like, we gotta make sure that kids know that there's other ways that they can solve these problems and think about things, and try to answer those questions. So that's why I feel pretty strongly about that. It's not really necessary in that young, developing brain stage.
And of course, they're watching what we do, right? Kids, so.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
they
Yeah,
are.
how we use our phones, how often they're with us, yeah. Someone back there.
Coming. I'm coming.
I sort of knew it was my turn to speak when I heard Merlin being used. And I thought, oh, wow, so they're going around using Merlin. They must be looking at the birds or something. And I do feel the need to not forget that the advancement of technology is a huge gift to the world and a blessing when used right. And when I was teaching school, I emphasized the mind. We were always developing our minds so we would understand and be able to take better care of ourselves and each other. And then the transcendentalism, is the mind. It's invisible, it's all over. I figure we're somehow magnetized in our minds, that we're all here tonight, for instance. There's something about whatever it is, it's invisible and it's huge, and we all partake of it. It's a joint expedition. So at the same time that I'm the last person to try to minimize the importance of actual contact with real people and being together, so important, let's not forget that the world is evolving. I personally think that Homo sapiens this is our swan song here, because there's an intelligence that we don't understand that's going on there. Only people who specialize in this language can understand it at all. They can't understand cursive.
No.
So times are changing, and let's all evolve for as many generations as we can. I have to tell you that I have this educational chart I kept all these years. It has the tree of evolution, that coming out of the ocean and climbing up through the different stages and animals and fish and vertebrate, and it goes at the top to human, to that wing that we're on, that starts with like Homo erectus and Homo something else, and the Neanderthals are in it. It's this branch of turning humanoid, or whatever the word is these days. But all it did to go from one species to another, the only thing that changed was that the people stood up a little taller, and they had bigger brains. And one by one, the species died out because something came along with a bigger brain and stood up taller. And the last picture is of a person standing up tall and straight. And that's Homo sapiens. We now are carrying the brains of the world in our pockets. Mm-hmm. This has got to amount to a new species along the way. And so let's live our lives.
Thank you so much. We
So,
have another one
well,
over here, another question in the back.
Yeah, thank you. Where am I going?
I'm so grateful to you all and that I could make it to this forum tonight. What a breath of fresh air. As an ex-patient empowerment coach of people, adult survivors of childhood trauma and frankly, mental health system tyranny, I'm curious about, I'm just really glad to hear about how there's, I heard such a commitment to getting a diverse group of kids together. And I feel like it's such a big deal for each developing child to understand that, yes, you're a sovereign person, you get to have boundaries so that when you experience trauma after trauma, you know that it's happening when it happens, even as a really young child, but you don't learn, you're just like, you never really, it takes a really long time to learn how to establish those boundaries. But also, of course, all humans, we feel our wholeness and connection and in groups, and how do you become a group and really enjoy it? So I imagine most of you, having done what you've done for a while, have had experiences with kids who have struggled in various ways and have really felt like the other. So my imagination says, well, I'm thinking of myself here. I've had a very nuanced role in mental health for decades, but I'm thinking, wow, if I were a kid, I'm used to being the other. Maybe there's something I can grow myself along with here if I had the opportunity and I could market it to my parents. But I'm just wondering if you all have experience with children, who you could really see they were a person. They weren't more fundamentally broken than others. They just had these traumatic themes. The heritability studies of therapeutic hate speech have crashed and burned for a couple of decades. And I also need to close by saying we absolutely do have allied folks in conventional roles in the who are in mental health. The system itself is very brutalizing. But anyway,
Thank you
thanks.
for your comment. We have time for a brief reaction, and then we need to close. So does anyone want to respond to the trauma thing, and then we've got one more, and then we'll close, yeah.
You want to talk first, or you want?
No, I'm just asking, do any of our panelists want to say anything in response to the trauma question?
I mean, I believe, I'm
Are
not.
you on? Is your camera?
I think so. Am I here?
Yeah.
I would just say, that there's a lot of research around trauma and nature and getting back to kind of that transcendentalist thought of the power of nature for healing that I think is, being more studied and researched. But I think just the whole kind of sense of wellness that what kids are able to do in Rivers and Revolution or being in a real world educational setting increases the sense of competence and confidence. And that is something that I think students, especially in our technology today with all the comparison and things on social media, I think that's really the healing through nature that is really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could just quickly say,
Quickly, yeah.
we walk 3, 4, 5 miles a day, and so a little exercise, getting out into the sunshine, some vitamin D, feeling a breeze, seeing new things, the novelty, sharing that with somebody. So you're walking around people and you have teachers coming in to check in. If you've noticed, are you feeling this? Goes a long way. And we've had students who are like self-selected mute start to talk, right, and on more than one occasion. So that safety of a learning community you can't overestimate how significant that is for kids who have
been through a lot. Thank you. We have time for one more brief, and then Shelley will ask you to
I
close.
just wanted to say that this was, as an adult listening to all of you, I experienced great joy. And so it reminded me of my childhood. It reminded me of the joyful moments I've had with my own children and grandchildren. And I kept thinking as you were all talking, each one of you brought so much to the different stages of life. And I kept thinking, we have this world where we have to survive and grow and change with all the technology. But I think you used the word break. We need the break in nature to heal us. And I totally agree that nature does heal. And all the research points to that. And wouldn't it be wonderful if instead of having education, and I think the Concord school system does a pretty good job at this, instead of creating very narrow channels of education, if we could insist that there is this opportunity from preschool, middle school, high school, college, and beyond, if we could remember these are the strains that need to continue to keep healthy growth and to keep people connected and keep people from caring about each other.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. Shelley, we're going to ask you to close us up here. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you all for coming. What a dream panel. And I enjoyed the way that Jenny distilled the important principles of transcendentalism, and then hearing these three educators that are really making the transcendentalism principles come alive today. And I think I saw Henry David Thoreau smile over there. Thank you and good night.
I'm sure it is.